I will now call the meeting to order. Our first order of business is to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. Commissioners, is there a motion to adopt the final agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Our next order of business is to adopt the minutes from the December 21st, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. Commissioners, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Thank you very much. The motion carries. We now move on to our first discussion item, and that is item 3.1, review of sketch plan for proposed Brookmore development by Lennar. I will now turn it over to Community and Economic Development Director Marty Dole for the staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. Yes, we are reviewing a sketch plat application for a development being called Brookmore, submitted by Lennar. We do have representatives from Lennar as well as the property owner in the audience this evening if you have any questions for either of them once we get to the discussion point. So just a reminder for the meeting body, there are no approvals or formal actions taken during this meeting. The sketch plat process really is just to provide guidance and assist the applicant in any subsequent preliminary plat application that may be coming before the bodies after this step. Property owners within 350 feet of the subject properties were notified and invited to participate in, not in this meeting, in a neighborhood meeting that was held last week, and we included some of that feedback in your background packet, and we'll go over a little of that this evening as well. So the area that is currently being proposed for development is 3 parcels currently located at 925 78th Street and 1100 78th Street. The property is south of Madeline Trail and the Heartwood developments, north of Savannah Valley and Holy Family, and on both east and west, on the east and west side of what will be an extension of Cochia Lane. The property in total is 34 acres, with approximately 25 of those being developable. The property is currently zoned as agricultural, and the applicant is requesting to rezone to PUD with R1 underlying zoning. As the land is currently zoned ag, it's currently primarily used for agricultural purposes with tillable farmland. It also has some small wetlands that are being proposed to be preserved. There are also 2 homes and some accessory structures on the properties that would be proposed to be removed as part of development. The area is guided in the city's comprehensive plan for low-density residential, which is 2.25 to 6 units per acre. The applicant is proposing 80 single-family homes, getting us to approximately 3.1 units per acre, which would satisfy the low-density residential requirements. So as was included in your background packet, here is the current concept layout for the development, and as always, we can come back to this slide once we get into discussion and questions. As I noted, the applicant is proposing this to be developed as a PUD with minimum lot area of 8,800 square feet, minimum lot depth of 68 feet, lot width, lot depth of 130 feet, a side yard setback of 9 feet on each side, 25-foot front yard setback, 30-foot rear yard setback, and max impervious surface of 4,500 square feet. The proposed bulk regulations are fairly comparable to what was recently approved for the Madeline Trail development to the north. As proposed, there would be a required 25-foot landscape buffer on any double-fronted lots. There are currently 4 shown in the concept plan that the applicant would intend to include that buffer and plantings. Applicant is also proposing to include a 15-foot landscape buffer along corner lots along Cochia as a collector road, and has indicated in their submittals that if possible, they will work to try to include some elevation in those buffer areas. Currently being proposed is an approximate 3-acre park within the development. Based on the number of units, 3.73 acres of parkland dedication would be required of this development. So the applicant would intend to satisfy that requirement with a 3-acre park, as well as park dedication fee and or trail credit that would be worked out as the development moved through the process. The Parks and Rec Committee will be reviewing this concept park area and size at their meeting tomorrow. The applicant is also proposing an 8-foot by 2-minute trail as required on one side of Cochia Lane, crossing within the development so that it is able to align with the trail to the north and south. As on the north of this development, the trail is on the east side of Cochia, and south of the development, the trail is on the west side of Cochia. So at some point within this development, likely at the area of the park, the trail would need to cross to the other side, as well as a couple of other smaller trail connections on the southwest corner, and some trail connecting up through the park on the north side. The applicant's also proposing to adhere to city requirements of 6-foot wide concrete sidewalks on one side of all local streets, as shown on the image in blue. Excuse me. Access is proposed to be provided to this development through several locations, including an extension of Cochia Lane, as well as extensions of Obsidian Way and Jade Lane through the Madeline Trail development to the north. Currently, the longer cul-de-sac has 27 homes located along it, which would be under the fire code requirement, which has a maximum of 30 homes on a single access point. The applicant is proposing, as I noted, to construct Cochia Lane through the development. That would provide the final connection of Cochia Lane all the way from Highway 5 at the north to 86th Street to the south. And all local streets within the development are proposed to be of the city standards for a 60-foot right-of-way and constructed to city standards. Sanitary sewer is proposed to be connected both from stub sewer from Madeline Trail as well as Savannah Valley in the southwest through the trail corridor that's being proposed, similar with water being connected from both Madeline Trail and Savannah Valley. This parcel is located within the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, so it is thus subject to their rules and will need to meet their requirement. The concept plan does show stormwater features, wetlands, and buffers on outlots, which would be required to be deeded to the city and not encroach on private lots. And then access will need to be provided to all stormwater ponds in accordance with city standards. Finally, as I noted, there was a neighborhood meeting that was held on January 12th last week. There were approximately 20 residents that attended that meeting, and just some of the items that were brought up during that meeting. There were some questions about tree tagging and inventory, and concerns regarding grading impacts to tree roots that are located on adjacent private property. Some concerns noted regarding stormwater pond slopes and whether retaining walls would be needed. The applicant has indicated that they are not anticipating the need for retaining walls. There was concern regarding construction dust, noise, and traffic, and there was discussion with city staff about the city's noise ordinance and construction ordinance, and a bit of dissatisfaction that the city does allow work on Saturdays as well as potential holidays with permission. There was request for landscaping or tree buffer on the south side of the development adjacent to Savannah Valley. Staff did note that the city does not typically require enhanced landscaping or screening between similar residential land uses. There were some concerns regarding drainage and elevation and how grading will tie into a city-owned outlot. Savannah Valley does appear to be a lower elevation, which could impact some of the views and sight lines of the homes in that area. There were concerns regarding impacts to stormwater, drainage, sump discharge for houses located along Narcissus and the depth of the stormwater ponds that will need to be looked at as engineering progresses on the development. There was some discussion regarding setbacks and a deviation from the R1 required 10-foot side yard setback. The applicant did indicate that 9 foot is the max they believe they can feasibly make work for this development. Similarly, there was a question about the 68-foot wide lots and how those would tie to existing properties to the north. Again, the applicant has indicated that the lot widths are the maximum size that would be financially feasible for them in this development. There was some discussion regarding impacts to nearby intersections such as Highway 5 and Cochia. Staff noted at that meeting that the city will likely be pursuing funding in the future for signal improvements at this intersection, as it has been identified in the Arboretum Area Transportation Plan. So there is likely going to be an additional need for those improvements to happen sooner than later. There was some questions, excuse me, about the cost and impact of park and how those are funded within the city. So staff discussed the park dedication fee and capital improvement plan and how parks are funded within the city. Some discussion about stormwater impacts to adjacent properties. Again, noted that additional engineering would be needed. A question or concern raised regarding water capacity impacts and the watering ban. And staff discussed that the water capacity is not necessarily the concern, but the concerns are more related to peak watering times. And then finally, there was a request for consideration of connecting a trail around the development through pond outlots to connect behind the lots to the proposed park. And just generally, folks were favorable towards the park location, and there was some discussion related to park programming. So ultimately, again, staff believes that the proposed concept plan is a feasible development, and believes that it's something that could move forward with a few recommendations to address the buffer and screening requirements per any feedback that's provided, a final determination on whether the proposed park area is satisfactory, the requirement to construct Cochia Lane through the property, a need to adhere to all the sewer, water, stormwater, and other technical engineering recommendations from the city engineer and the watershed district as plans progress, and then a continued discussion to try to address any resident concerns to the extent it is feasible. And with that, Chair, Commissioners, I will turn it back over to you. As I did mention, there are representatives from the development group that are here to answer questions you might have.
Very good. Thank you very much, Marty. Yeah, I'll now open it up to commissioners. Any questions, any concerns?
My first comment would be with the ponding and the Pulte development in their wetland area, is there a way that that can be done more efficiently, or is there going to be a wetland and a pond right next to each other, or how is that going to work out?
One of you gentlemen, would you like to address that, please?
Sure.
Yes. Hi, Josh Metzer with Lennar.
Hi, Josh.
Did we want to maybe get a bunch of questions or go one at a time?
Yeah, whatever.
As they flow, sure.
Okay, sure. So the pond that we're proposing here on the north side will be, at this point, will be separate from the wetland. Generally, and John Bender with Westwood is here. Westwood also designed the Pulte community. So it's my understanding that it's not a good idea to combine preserved wetland with a stormwater pond. So that's why we're proposing a separate pond adjacent to the wetland. John, maybe if you could discuss how there's some overflow from that wetland down to our southeast here. So maybe John can kind of highlight how that works to get a better understanding of what happens there.
Very good. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm John Bender with Westwood, civil engineer on the project. As you may already be aware, the Pulte development, the outlet from their ponding and wetland complex discharged to the south into drain tile that routes through our site and ultimately ends up in that pond that you can see just to the southeast, just south of our southeast corner. So we'll maintain that drainage direction, but we will have to, of course, reroute that. We'll take out the drain tile and we'll reroute it through new engineered piping. To address the question about having separate ponds, generally, in order to avoid what would be considered an impact to the wetland, we need to keep stormwater ponding, which is, relatively dirty water or unclean water, separate from the wetland. So that's really the reason why we're keeping the cells, the wetland, the Pulte pond, and our pond separate.
Okay. I think they're awfully close, and there could be transfer back and forth one way or the other.
You're thinking our water could discharge into their wetland, or?
Yes.
Okay. And we will, as we actually delve into the engineering, there may be some opportunity there that I'm not thinking of just yet, but typically when we begin a design, we plan to have the pond separate from wetlands so that we're not impacting the wetland. But if there's an opportunity there to make a more efficient design, we'll certainly explore that.
Great. And as we're on ponds, you've got it's a new pond down here on the southeast corner. That's a pretty steep area. Is that pond then flowing into the other two that would be within Savannah Valley area and then flowing down and through back towards Highway 5?
Do you mean the one in the southwest corner?
Southwest corner, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we will, again, we'll narrow down the specifics of this as we design the engineering, but it's anticipated that southwest pond will discharge into the Savannah Valley pond that's directly south of ours, and then route in the same direction that all those ponds currently drain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a quick question for you.
Sure.
The depth of the pond in the southwest corner, I know that there were people on the Narcissus side that are concerned about that water that today flows off of those fields essentially into their backyard. Given the amount of clay that's back there, there's concern that there could be a lot of hydraulic pressure to push that pond water up into basements that are along there. Are you going to be able to increase the depth of that pond so that you can take some of that pressure off the foundation that can flow into the Savannah Valley pond?
That's an interesting question. I would need to explore it more closely as I'm getting into the engineering, but I think what you're asking is, can the pond be below the low floor elevations of the adjacent homes?
Correct.
I would have to analyze the elevations there. Just looking at the grading, the existing topography, it does appear that the existing grades are, they're more or less consistent with the neighboring grades. So assuming that they have a 8-foot deep basement, I think what we would have to do is we'd have to look at the permeability of the soil to determine if we can, maybe a proper solution would be to adequately line the pond so that we don't have migration of water. That might be the most appropriate solution here.
Okay. So if you would do that, that would be great, because there's been concerns raised about that. Then I just had a quick question for you. On the trail connection where you have where's the lot that begins with the cul-de-sac, and then tying that into the existing trail that's there. The neighbor that lives at that top house is concerned about the amount of traffic that tie-in would lead, and then, of course, snow being pushed into his yard. He has a pool, so he's concerned about that coming off. Is there an ability to move those two lots to the east of that over, and then bring the trail in between? You don't have a lot numbers, but if you just draw a line straight north from the cul-de-sac in Savannah Valley where the path already comes in, to Y that in and bring the access point through there and bring the water mains into that, because then you minimize the traffic that's coming up at that upper part. I can assure you that the traffic of people using a park in this will actually want to be using a park with playground equipment, which lives in Savannah Valley. So it'll be easier for them to access and probably cut down on the number of people cutting through lots to shortcut your trail, which takes you around and then back.
Okay.
And then, but the bigger concern, I think, is having the water mains run through that strip where you would put the trail would probably be preferable to have a water main break in a trail than break in between two houses.
Right, and the utility layout at this point is sort of schematically drawn, so the exact alignment will be worked out with as we move towards, forward with preliminary plans. But I don't know, Josh, you wanted to speak about the trail?
Commissioner Vansky, just to confirm, you're talking, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you're talking just kind of straight up from the cul-de-sac here. Is that where you're?
Yeah, like slide these lots over to the west and bring the trail.
Just straight from the cul-de-sac? Okay, just wanted to confirm.
You could probably move these two lots and just bring the trail in here and tee it into the sidewalk.
And part of the reason for showing it where it's the current alignment is this would double as an access to our pond on that southwest side as well for the city. Marty, is the access to the Savannah Valley ponds currently coming along that trail, along the north side of the home there at the end of the cul-de-sac?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot here.
I think that is, Marty, I think that's all an outlot that runs all along there.
It is city outlet, but I guess my question is, if that's already a route for city vehicles, for city access to that pond, it probably wouldn't impact that homeowner right there. But if we were to bring that trail from the end of the cul-de-sac there, essentially any city vehicles getting to our pond would have to come all the way alongside that home in Savannah Valley that has the pool. So if that's already where city vehicles are accessing the ponds in Savannah Valley, I'm sure it wouldn't make a big change in the daily life of that resident there. But if that trail were moved further east, that's that much further that city vehicles would have to travel adjacent to that home.
Yeah, so Commissioner Vansky, it does appear that the access is through that trail currently. So I'd imagine the city vehicles are coming through the trail and down to access the ponds in this area.
So I guess for us, if we can make the engineering work, I don't know that it makes a big difference to us if that trail is east or west there, so we could certainly take a look at.
Yeah, if you would, I think you're gonna have a more workable solution, having that trail just be one shot north for both the people in Savannah Valley to use that to come up to the other park and go out, and then for the people that are gonna be in this neighborhood to come down and use city parks that Savannah Valley already has in place.
Yeah.
'Cause I don't suspect you'll have playground equipment in your park on day one, correct?
That's probably not. It's up to the city to program and timing on that. But
Yeah, Commissioner Vansky, chair, members of the commission, the parks are programmed through the Parks Department's capital improvement plan, and we're likely 5+ years out until this park would get programmed.
Okay, well, I think the families will want to use a playground before 5 years, and they'll have one more easily accessible, so just making that easier for them to get there and reduce the temptation for them to cut through people's yards and have a straight shot to get theirs. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, having the water main come through there is the biggest feature of using that path.
So what's your pond access to the other pond, the big pond by the wetland? Does that go through a residential lot?
the pond on the north here,
Yeah.
I believe there's a pond access there just to the north of us. Pulte, I believe, provided a pond access that would
Oh, that's on
double
Pulte's property, that pond access?
right.
Yeah, Commissioner Kuhn.
But city property now.
Yeah, Commissioner Kuhn, chair, members of the commission, this will be something that we'll review a little more closely once we get to preliminary plat and a preliminary grading plan, assuming that the grades work to be able to come through that pond access and down into the new Lennar pond. It's likely an acceptable access, assuming that it's accessible. So from concept level, we've kind of looked at that and said it seems like it might work, and we'll dig farther into that as we get to more engineered plans.
Could I ask what the reasoning is of having the trail on the east side of Cochia versus where the park is on the west side of Cochia?
So the existing trail, as Marty pointed out, the existing trail north of us on Cochia is on the east side currently. In our experience, trail crossings are best located at intersections for safety purposes. So that's why we're proposing to obviously continue it down the east side of Cochia, cross at the intersection to the park, and then the trail picks up on the west side of Cochia as it's located on the west side to our south.
Gotcha. I thought it was on the other side. My fault. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, Commissioner Pedersen, Chair, members of the commission, it will need to cross at some point in the development. Currently, the applicant's proposing to cross at the intersection, but as I noted, we've got it on the east side on the north and the west side on the south. So somewhere within this development, it will need to cross.
Other concerns, Terry?
No, I was just thinking, the intersections could be interesting when the high school kids are leaving.
That's exactly what, that was
Because
one of my
I
first,
experienced that on 18 in Cochia.
yes.
Many of them, even though it says stop for a crosswalk, many of them choose not to. Having to switch lanes with kids and bikes in the park, I'd worry a little bit about that.
Especially if that's not a four-way stop there.
Traffic is gonna really pick up here right away. So that was one of my biggest concerns, was like, how do we slow people down along this section here, with this
I
intersection?
think there should be a four-way stop somewhere in between the high school or in that stretch, whether it's this intersection or somewhere else.
Certainly at
Especially-
78th also.
Well, 78th and right down there in Cochia, that should be a four-way stop there going. Especially if there isn't one there, I mean, it's gonna be a free-for-all to Highway 5.
It is, yeah.
Straight shot.
Yeah, I think you look at the, you know, you're exactly right, Lori. You look at what the traffic flow could be, you know, the path of the least resistance.
It'll
And
alleviate
it
Bavaria and 18, I can tell you that, so don't worry about that. There's times where you want to leave my subdivision at 7:45 if everybody's dropped their kid off at school and is heading back wherever they're going. So a park's required here, but a park wasn't required in the Pulte development because they could walk across the street to a park.
Commissioner Schwarting, Chair, members of the commission, a park is not required in this location per the comp plan, but based on the conversations of this body and the city council, staff had recommended that a park is potentially desired in this area, and the applicant is proposing a 3-acre park because of those conversations that were held with the previous development. But you are correct, it is not, per the comprehensive plan, there's not a park identified for this area.
I guess a question I have is, you know, Victoria, we're always looking for more affordable housing. This gets a little closer. These are smaller homes. What could the city do? What accommodations could the city make that would enable you to still provide a very good product, pay for the land appropriately, make a good profit for yourself, but make more affordable homes?
There's certainly ways. This has been a hot topic in the development community and with cities over the last few years here. From the city's perspective, at least in our opinion, it would be fees. Obviously, I don't know that there's anything that can be done with this community and timing of evaluation of fees, but you know, if the city feels like taking another look at fees and really assessing where those dollars are going, if they're really being used as the funds that are being taken or collected at the time of development, are those indeed the fees, you know, necessary to sustain that development for the city? In certain cases, you might say yes. In certain cases, you might say, that fee's a little high. In some, you might say it's a little too low. But for us, it's, you know, one way for the cities to possibly do it is to reevaluate their fees and see how they're structured and see if they make sense for sustaining that development long term.
So your home prices were, I'm trying to recall, 400 to 500.
Yeah.
What percent of that is fees?
That I'm not sure. I'd have to take a look, and I could certainly take a look and have that information for you at
I can't speak for the city, but I'm just curious. I'm curious if we're trying to lower and I know that I have a son that lives in Bozeman, Montana, and their housing is through the roof. Yeah. And there's a couple developments where the city is cutting their fees to try to create some lower cost housing for people.
Sure.
So we fight that same battle here.
Yeah, and it's, and it's not just city fees, obviously, it's materials, everyone knows is going up everywhere, whether it's building materials, food, clothing, cars, you name it, everything's going up. And it's getting hard, it's getting, more and more difficult to build an affordable home. The price of land, of course, the Twin Cities is unique in that we have Met Council that runs our sewer and water for the Twin Cities, and they drew a boundary around the Twin Cities saying anything outside of this boundary doesn't get our sewer and water, anything within it does. So any land that's, developable within that line went up because of that. And of course, a property like this that's in a community like Victoria that's, developing fast, but it's one of the few remaining pieces of property that's close to downtown and close to Highway 5 and close to the high school. It'll get a good price for it. So there's various factors obviously driving the price of housing these days. But yeah, from our perspective, if there's anything the city could do is just take another look at fees, and whether you have the capacity or the time for a study of fees again, that would be a good place to start.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
I think, Terry, with affordable housing, if our objective is to create housing that's inexpensive to start, that's one thing. And I think that's certainly one of our goals. And I think we've discussed that. But you have to also factor in what the market does and how the market drives the price up. That's just going to happen organically. And that's something we just can't control, right? I mean, to your point, I mean, it's in a really great location. It's this one little pocket that's not developed with everything else around it in a very, great location. Victoria, a lot of the growth has happened west, as we all know. But this is east, which, people that are coming from the west might prefer the east side of Victoria, right? So is there value to that? I don't know. But
Yeah, no, I understand.
it's got its challenges. It's not simple. So I guess the question that I just want to follow up with, I guess we need to develop what our objective is, right? So as a planning commission, do we want to have an affordable house price starting in, or do we want to somehow create, prices that are, how do we manage that? I guess we can't. That's my point. Sorry if that's me rambling, but yeah.
Well, it kind of goes back to the 9-foot side yard setback versus a 10-foot side yard setback. What's your reason for that extra foot? Yeah, you don't get 80 lots, you maybe get 78 lots or 76 lots. And then now all of a sudden the price of the lot gets divided by all the other stuff. And is it then make it workable for you and for the, everybody else? You think 1 foot on each side ain't good, but then you drop the house size down, or you want the 80 lots, you got to go with a smaller house size because your house square footage is down. We're constantly squeezing more houses into more, with less and less side yard setbacks. And I don't know what the answer is on that either. I'd like to see the 10-foot, but I know it just probably ain't gonna work because you get less houses or whatever. I guess I don't know why your reasoning is. You say it's not feasible, but if that's the reason, or what your reason is for the feasibility of not being able to go 10 feet.
Sure. And we discussed this a little bit at the neighborhood meeting. If you look at most Lennar communities, and I believe a lot of, John could probably speak to the side yard setback for Pulte or DR Horton. Most of our single family communities, I would say over 90%, we have a 7.5-foot side setback on each side actually, which achieves a 15-foot spacing between homes, which in all of our communities, it works. It's enough room to get, you know, to be able to maintain your house, to get crews around your house that need to do any work on it. It's, you know, enough of a side yard. I don't know how many people really use their side yard for much function, but
Accessibility to the backyards. For
right.
Building a deck or getting
So
equipment
right.
back there.
And if you, it's something that works for us. You know, obviously back in the 90s, it was wider lots. It was a greater side yard setback. This is just kind of one way to try to help keep up with not only cost of land and development, but it works, it functions. Lake Town, our development down Victoria Road, those are 8-foot side setbacks. So if you were to drive through that community, you know, you'll see 8-foot side yard setbacks. So those homes are 2 feet closer together than these will be. You know, I know that the Pulte development was approved with 9. So it's really, most of our communities do have a 7.5-foot side setback, and it seems to work. It works for our residents. That is one thing that I've never heard a complaint about, that they wish they had a larger side yard. Here it would have an impact, like you mentioned. You know, it might not be, we wouldn't lose 10 lots or anything like that, but we would lose a couple. And with, I believe it's about 8 lots that we gave up with the park dedication. So that was a lot already for us to forego. So that 9-foot side setback, even though it, you know, 3 lots or so might not sound like a lot, it can make a difference.
Thank you.
So, and I'd encourage you to take a drive through Lake Town.
I have.
And see what you think.
Driven
And it's
through a lot of your developments in Lakeville and Chanhassen, and it's just, it seems like it's just everything's getting smaller and smaller. And I work construction and try to get into backyards when people want to put a swimming pool in, and you can't get an excavator back there, or you know, you got to work with the neighbor, or because by the time they put their, you know, landscaping out 2-3 feet from the house, you know, and they're both doing that, you don't really have room besides the wheelbarrow or small, you know, walk behind to get equipment back there, and it just gets tougher and tougher. And you know, some people don't want it, some people, you know, it's just getting access back there whenever you need to do something, whether it's put in
and
a paper patio or something, and you got to do some minor excavating. It's tough.
Sure. And, you know, obviously, you know, not every lot's going to end up right at 68 feet wide. If you look at I was just reviewing the Pulte, the Madeline Trail plat today, and I believe the community was approved for 68-foot wide lots. I don't think there's one 68-foot wide lot there. I think the most narrow is 68.5. A lot of them were 69.5, some were 71. So there's certainly going to be a number of these homes that'll be greater than, or lots that'll be greater than 68 feet wide. And of course, with that, you're going to get a larger side yard setback. So we're just requesting 9 as the minimum. Of course, a lot of these will be built to greater than that, just because the nature of, you know, you go down the lot, down the block, it's not gonna be 68.
I think it's been one of our goals of this commission is to try to get back to that 10-foot wide setback in Victoria. That it's been done elsewhere and there's been a precedent. Doesn't mean that precedent then drives all future decision-making. I have to say that given what has been done recently, I think that it's commendable that you guys went to 9 foot. This neighborhood is actually being sandwiched into existing neighborhoods that already have those setbacks and even wider. So that's probably why we're probably a little bit more focused on this. If you're pushing stuff out into the development area that's south of the city, almost in Lake Town Township, then, you know, that is almost like you get to rewrite the rules a little bit out there because you don't have any integration that you're trying to push into existing communities. So the homes that surround this are, as you well know, are like, some of the houses are on double lots. And the other homes that being integrated into have the 10-foot wide setbacks, but when you walk out there, the way the homes are arranged is that it's really backloaded garages almost that are 10-foot apart. So you get a feel that you almost have a 20-foot wide setback in between the houses. So I think it's important here that we get it right when we're integrating something in and trying to get the most consistent feel as to what's already surrounded there. So the park, I think, makes a big dedication in your favor in shrinking that setback down. And at 9 foot, it's tighter than what we might have, but we might want. But I'll leave the rest of the commissioners to have their opinions on it as well. But sure. I think that in this instance, it works a little bit better.
Building off of that, I think in the 7.5s, we've also been pretty strict about you need to engineer drain tile into these side yards because of the clay, and there's not going to be enough sun, and those things are going to turn to mush, and hills start to slide away, and people aren't going to be happy with it. Just building off of what you've said. So there's a couple of us who are pretty sensitive to side yard setbacks and want to see them wider. We might be 2 or 3 of the only ones in town, but we happen to sit on this group. So I've watched it happen in many yards around my neighborhood. So, and I do live south of this, so. I have a question about the tree screening. Where is that exactly located on here? There was a resident that wanted, or a couple that were asking about it. Is that north of the ponding, or is that south of the development?
I know a lot of the screening concern came from the neighbors to our south, mostly because of the elevation change.
Okay.
Of course, we can't answer the question yet exactly what elevation our homes are going to sit at until we have a grading plan. But undoubtedly, I'm sure they're going to end up somewhere above the existing homes to our south in Savannah Valley. So we're going to have to work on this with staff, obviously, because there's going to be easements down there that we have to keep free from trees. We're going to have to, in order to keep, especially because we're above these homes, we're going to have to run storm sewer along the rear of these homes to make sure that our water staying on our property is being routed through sewer to our pond. So we obviously can't plant on top of those. So if we were to be able to provide some screening, maybe it's, is the city open to us providing some screening on that city property, that city outlot? It might be the best solution. I know that a lot of these, in speaking with a lot of these residents the other night, they've been actively planting on their rear or maybe even on the city's property.
Oh, there's stuff that's in the city's property.
Yeah.
Does the city own the berm? If you're on Cochia and you're looking into Savannah Valley, you see the berm come back up.
Yeah.
So is that an outlot?
Yeah, Commissioner Schwarting, you can kind of see it on this drawing on the screen here, but the red line is the Savannah Valley property lines, and then that area in between is the city-owned outlot where the berm is located, and also some private fire pits are located.
I was going to say, there's stuff in there.
Yeah.
I know everything can be fixed and rerouted and done, but how complicated is the stuff that's in that berm and in that outlet going to be?
Commissioner Pedersen, members of the commission, are you referring to the private stuff that's in there or the public
No,
stuff?
the public stuff. Like, it's on the outlot, but then there's water mains down there, there's fire lines, there's all sorts of other good stuff.
To answer your question, I think that we'd expect that there'd be minimal impacts to that area, especially related to utilities that are already in the ground. As for the grading, there's going to be some interplay that needs to be developed with the grading plan. Obviously, you don't want it to just be a sharp transition, so if there's an opportunity to tie it in well with this development, that'll be evaluated with the engineering.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, it does bear mention, Isaac, that there is a lot of private stuff that has been pushed into there. And it's a question of the intestinal fortitude on the part of the city to do something about it if they choose. We just need to be probably a little bit careful with not having monkey see, monkey do in this situation now that a new subdivision is coming online. I think screening in the city-owned outlot is probably a good idea because of the elevation change, because people will probably be sitting at their breakfast table and be able to look in somebody's bedroom or bathroom window on the second floor of their house that's now 20 feet below your subdivision going in. Marty might want to give consideration to a plan for screening planted in the outlot so that the drainage easements can be made in the drain tile and enough berming to keep the water from flowing into the backyards of the people in Savannah Valley. I don't think that they'll be particularly happy having water flow and peeping neighbors in both. And then the typical remedy for screening on a private lot is a fence, but that's not going to do anybody any good when your fence is sitting at 10 feet below the foundation line of the house above it. So that isn't really a remedy for these people.
Commissioner Vansky, chair, members of the commission, I think at least from a staff perspective, we're open to continuing those discussions with the developer and potentially providing for some off-site planting on the city's outlot. I don't think that's, and as Isaac mentioned, I don't think there's huge concerns there.
Great.
How wide does this easement need to be for the vehicles to get through?
Commissioner Moore, are you referring to the pond access easements? We typically require 20 feet of width.
Okay. I'm just curious how much you can really plant with that width.
I was actually going to add on the screening topic. One of the things that we did take into consideration on the north side, seeing that they were much larger lots that were platted, I think, in the 60s sometime. That's part of the reason that we did pull, trying to pull. Of course, this is concept. We may have to push them right up to the north again, but we're currently trying to see if it's possible to keep our property lines back from that north property line in order to plant some sort of landscaping buffer, potentially even some ponding in there to create more of a spacing buffer. But that is something that we're looking to carry through here with the pre-plat.
Are you doing a mix of single family and villa style, or is it all just going to be
all single family? 50-foot wide homes, 3-car garage, mostly 2-story. We do have one single-story plan that we're going to mix in with that. And again, with the with the neighbors on the south, hopefully over time, these folks will introduce themselves to each other. We'll get to know each other as neighbors, and it become a little less. Rather than some stranger behind me staring in my windows, it's Jim and Janie back there.
It's changed. How long has Savannah Valley been here? Those people have backed up to nothing, and it's just changed.
19 years.
And yeah, these are some of the more difficult type of developments for us. These infill developments, they can be very emotional, and we recognize that. So we'll certainly try to do what we can to blunt the impact of the development.
Just to get it on the record, and I know it's sensitive for some other folks, I don't know how big a 3-acre park is, but would like a few parking spots be something that they would want to put into a 3-acre park? I know.
Yeah, Commissioner Pedersen, chair, members of the commission, typically when we're platting new park, when we get into preliminary plat, the city will do just kind of a draft overview or overlay of what we think might go into that area. Ann Mankey, our Parks Director, will kind of determine, do we need some parking? How much parking do we need? And we'll typically try to just ensure that the things we think we might want when that's programmed will fit. It can be graded accordingly. But as was mentioned, ultimately that's the city's responsibility to build those when they program the park. But it'll certainly be something that'll be considered as to whether or not parking's needed and how much parking would be needed and where we think is going to be the best place, which can all change when the park actually gets programmed, but it's always a good idea to try to plan ahead.
Sure. I just want to get it on the record for as we're discussing things going forward. I guess my last point would be, a few years ago, Cochia and 5 in our local newspaper was termed the killing fields. I think that's a little harsh, but there have been numerous accidents at 5 and Cochia. So it's not necessarily you as the developer situation, but again, to get it on the record, something needs to be done, especially with the high school and access to 5 from Cochia, because if nothing is done, it could very well become something similar to the killing fields.
Commissioner Pedersen, Chair, members of the commission, I think historically, one of the responses from the Department of Transportation has been that there's not enough trips on the side streets at Park and Cochia and 5 to warrant a signal. So over the last 12 to 24 months, anticipating that something may occur in this area, now we're receiving applications for it. The Department of Transportation has been made aware of that, which is kind of footing in the ability to pursue funding, tying in with the Arboretum Area Transportation Plan to finally, hopefully, get something in the ground there soon.
We also have the park access on the other side, Cochia, and you wouldn't want to go to the dog park and try to get a left out of there onto 5 at rush hour. So I think the lights there also for park access.
Park Road.
Yeah, very, yeah, we have identified some issues, for sure. I have seen, I'm sure, Marty, you've seen some preliminary drawings for a stoplight at Cochia and 5. That will be the path of least resistance for many. But, I think Laura's comment on a stoplight, or a stop sign rather, certainly at 78th would be one, and probably somewhere in between at the same time. We always talk about we're the city of parks and lakes, but it's parks and lakes and cars that we have to deal with. So we've, that's a city issue, obviously, but if it's going to be developed, the cars will be flowing at the same time too. So, any other thoughts? Any other concerns?
Well, just back to Cochia and 5. I don't know that a stoplight is the answer. I get nervous about that, quite honestly. And obviously, Met Council is going to know a lot more about that than me. But we want cars to come and go freely along 5. We don't want to slow them down because people wait at the stoplight forever. And so adding another stop before they get to the next stop, which is just a Bavaria, makes me a little nervous. I get a little more comfortable with a right lane, that just widening that section so where you can just freely take a right. That might be the better solution to keep traffic moving. I don't know if there is land there to expand that. So that's just my 2 cents, but something has to be considered there.
Commissioner Moore, Chair, members of the commission, we're getting a little bit outside of the purview of this development, but just to kind of close the loop on, close the loop on that. As Isaac alluded to, it's understood by both MnDOT and the city, obviously, that that's an intersection that needs some action. And now with the Pulte development to the north, the Lennar development potentially to the south, connection of Cochia, it's only going to escalate the timing on MnDOT stepping forward and doing some studying and determining, is it a signal, is it right lane expansions, those sorts of things. I think we, at least from a staff level, anticipate that development is going to drive that to happen sooner rather than later. And then related to stop signs, as you'll recall with the Pulte development on the north side, that will be monitored by engineering to see if and when that warrants a 4-way stop. I imagine the intersection here of Cochia and the 4-way would be a similar concept. Engineering will study it based on the plans and determine what signage should be recommended to be out there initially, and then continue to monitor to determine when and if that warrants 4-way stop. And I think you're right. It might be found that sooner rather than later 4-way stops may be needed in some of those areas.
So, do we have enough information from the preliminary review to move forward on this? Is there any other additional information that we would want to bring out? You know, I think it is, it's a project that, you know, I think most of us would say,
It's gonna happen.
it's gonna happen, yes. Yep, that's exactly. So, let's figure out how to do it the best that we possibly can. And, is there anything else, Marty, that you would want from us at this time?
No, Chair, members of the commission, again, I think we appreciate your feedback. I took some notes. I think that our friends here from Lennar have taken some notes, and we'll go back and talk through it and see what kind of tweaks and changes should be made and continue moving forward through the process.
Very good.
Well, just on that, to throw the Baby Ruth bar in the pool for Caddyshack fans, is there enough room to cut down the size of the park and put 4 lots in there and then and put a roundabout in that intersection that connects the 2 sides of the subdivision?
Commissioner Vansky, Chair, members of the commission, I believe there's room to add additional lots and reduce the size of the park. That's something that was actually, we saw in an earlier proposal, but the Parks Director had requested a minimum of 3-acre park. Related to making that intersection a roundabout, I'd defer to the development team to speak to any experiences or things they've had with those types of situations in the past.
A roundabout within a neighborhood like this doesn't make a lot of sense. That's going to eat up a lot of land. It's going to be a lot of maintenance for the city. I mean, if the city would want us to pursue a roundabout, we're probably talking about, in order for us to make it feasible, eliminating the park in order to get lots back. That would mean creating an access off of Lilac or 79th and a half to access some of those lots, which I know that neighborhood probably would not be very excited about. Yeah, a roundabout in a local street neighborhood like this, I know it's a collector, but it's essentially a neighborhood, wouldn't make a lot of sense, at least in our experience. And again, just from the amount of land that they eat up. And it is a lot more considerable infrastructure for the city to have to maintain long-term.
Very good.
I was just going to mention a couple things that sometime are of interest is maybe our timeline. We're hoping to get a pre-plat submitted sometime in mid-February maybe, which would hopefully get us to Planning Commission and City Council review sometime in May is what we'd anticipate. And once that happens, we'd probably start grading activities right away. It was discussed and mentioned at the neighborhood meeting that we would grade this entire site at once. I forgot, Tony helped remind me. We are actually purchasing the property in 2 phases. So we are purchasing the west phase this year. The east we will purchase next year. So we would start on the east or the west side, grade everything. It probably wouldn't take nothing more than a month to get that graded. And hopefully that once we have pre-plat approved, we can hopefully move fairly quickly through final plat, get a development agreement in place, so we can start street and utilities from there with the hope of starting a model construction sometime this fall. So, but we're very excited for another opportunity here in Victoria. We sold through Rhapsody very quickly. We're selling through Laketown very quickly. It's a great community, and we're excited for another opportunity here.
Well, and we're also here to help you make things happen. So
Great.
we do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. With that, I will close this item. Thank you very much, commissioners. And we will go on to the second discussion item on our agenda, which is item 3.2. Review of the 2021 year-end, or end-of-year report for City Council. And I'll turn this over to Marty again.
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. Yes, as you'll recall earlier last year, I guess, we're now in 2022, we did a similar review session for a mid-year report to the City Council. So we are intending to go over some of our accomplishments in 2021 to do an end-of-year report to the City Council at their meeting on the 24th. This is something that has been requested by the City Council for all of its advisory commissions, with the anticipation that the chair, the vice chair, if the chair is unable to be able to provide that report. So for the first year accomplishments, I'll kind of buzz through those relatively quickly since we reviewed them a little more in depth during our mid-year report, and then we'll kind of talk about the things we did at the end of the year. But in January, we obviously adopted our work plan and meeting calendar. We also held a public hearing for a variance request for Waterbrook Fellowship Church. That one was actually recommended denial, and I know they're still working on trying to revise some of those addition plans to come forward at a later date. In February, we continued discussing our tree preservation and replacement ordinance, as well as held a public hearing and considered updates to the Victoria zoning map. In March, we reviewed the sketch plat for Madeline Trail and also continued our tree preservation and replacement ordinance discussions. And then later in March, reviewed sketch plat for the shores of Marsh Lake and held a public hearing and considered a conditional use permit for the Humanity Alliance, which was recommended for approval and ultimately approved by the City Council. In April, Chair Iverson was elected chair and Christian Pedersen was elected vice chair of this group. We also held a public hearing and considered preliminary plat, annexation, and zoning for Rolling Hills, which later became Huntersbrook. On the April 20th meeting, we held a public hearing and considered vacation of the park designation and minor subdivision of a city-owned lot and parkland to create a buildable residential lot along Smithtown. The City Council actually just approved a purchase agreement at their last meeting for that lot. So that one is in the process of being sold. And then we also reviewed the sketch plat for Rolling Hills South, which has become Marsh Hollow, which will actually be coming for final plat before this board at our next meeting in February. In May, we held a public hearing and considered preliminary plat for Madeline Trail, also continued discussions on the tree preservation and replacement ordinance. And then in June, we held a public hearing and considered amendments to the subdivision ordinance, continued discussions on tree preservation and replacement ordinance, considered the final plat for Rolling Hills, which is now Huntersbrook, which was approved by the City Council, and we reviewed our mid-year report. So those were the items that we reviewed back in June, some of our accomplishments from this year. So for the second half of 2021, in July, we held a public hearing and we considered amendments to the tree preservation and replacement ordinance after several working sessions and discussion on that. The Planning Commission recommended approval and the Council ultimately approved those revisions. The final plat for Madeline Trail was recommended for approval by this group and was also ultimately approved by the City Council. And then we also had a discussion about the designated predatory offender residency restrictions ordinance. In August, we held a public hearing and considered preliminary plat, annexation, and zoning for Rolling Hills South / Marsh Hollow. This group recommended approval, and the council approved the preliminary plat. Preliminary plat and zoning was also reviewed in that meeting for the shores of Marsh Lake, which was recommended for approval by this group and approved by the council. And then amendments to the predatory offender residency restriction ordinance were reviewed by this group, recommended approval, and those changes were also ultimately approved by the City Council. In September, we held a public hearing and considered a variance for a swimming pool fence at Hawks Point Lane. This commission recommended approval for that, and that variance was approved by the council. We also held a public hearing and considered some minor amendments requested by the DNR to our shoreland ordinance, which was recommended for approval and approved by the City Council. And then we also began our residential zoning districts discussion and discussed our R1, R2, R3, and R4 zoning districts. In October, we held a joint meeting with the city council to discuss the Downtown West project and the preliminary development agreement that the council ultimately approved with Kraus Anderson. We also considered the final plat for Shores of Marsh Lake. This group recommended approval, and that again was also approved by the city council. And we also continued discussions on residential zoning districts, specifically our PUD ordinance. In November, we held a joint city council workshop with the Urban Land Institute panel and discussed affordable housing. And in December, we reviewed a sketch plat for the Arboretum Convenience Commercial Development proposal. We held a public hearing and considered a variance for rear yard setbacks for 1975 Primrose Lane. That was recommended for approval and approved by the council. And then continued our residential zoning districts discussion, digging into the weeds a little deeper on residential land use. So that concluded our 2021 action items that were taken throughout the year. Just a little bit of putting some of those items against our work plan and how we fared on getting items in our work plan done. So our first and initial charge is to really hear and provide the recommendations on these developments, variances, conditional use permits as applications come in. This body in 2021 reviewed 4 sketch plats, 4 preliminary plats, 3 final plats, 3 variances, as well as 1 conditional use permit. So we were pretty busy with development and those types of things, working through the process. Our second item on the work plan was reviewing our downtown parking ordinance. We did have a few working groups, and as you'll recall, the council has tabled any amendments to that, at least for the time being. I'd anticipate that will likely come up sometime in the next 12 to 18 months again. One of our charges was to review the tree preservation and replacement ordinance, and we, as I mentioned, recommended approval, and the council adopted those amendments in July of this year, so that was completed. 2 items that we did not get to in 2021 and have been pushed to our 2022 work plan, talking about downtown design and placemaking standards, specifically related to impending development in downtown West, and then reviewing the Victoria Works area and the study that was done and commenting on any applications that are likely to begin coming in sometime again in the next 6 to 12 to 18 months for that area as our utilities get closer. Residential and zoning and PUD review, that is one that we knew going into was going to be a long process. We've held several meetings already, and we anticipate holding more meetings on that over the next coming months to provide some recommendations to the council. Review and provide recommendations on the zoning code. So we updated the zoning map, subdivision ordinance, predatory offender ordinance, tree preservation ordinance, as well as some minor changes to the shoreland ordinance. Any other planning or zoning goals from the council's strategic plan, this something like that Smithtown lot, which I referenced, that the council had directed us to review a minor subdivision and park vacation. And then, of course, our mid-year and end-of-year reports, and we are completing that this evening. So, excuse me, Chair, members of the commission, that concludes a very quick overview of our 2021 highlights, and with that, I'll open it up to any questions or discussion you might have.
Is there anything anyone can add to make us look even better?
You did a pretty good job.
We did actually cover a lot of them.
I would like to commend the commission. We've had a lot of things thrown at us, and I feel like that a lot of good work came out of this group, so kudos to all of you.
I think that there's actually one accomplishment that is missing, and that is, and I have the worst record out of everybody, at least my own personal view of it, is that there has been in Austin Powers terms, cross-mogenation between Planning Commission and City Council, with members of the Planning Commission attending council meeting and reporting back. I don't see that in here. Is that something that we want to get in here and say, hey, we've built this bridge? And
Good point.
Yeah, Commissioner Urbanski, Chair, members of the commission, very good point. I'll make sure that that gets added in as well as an accomplishment for this last year.
Excellent.
And fingers crossed, I'll make good on
my contribution next week.
Well, Terry and I were talking, well, before the meeting, and, you know, essentially, rather than every other week, it's been, you know, we've missed an awful lot of meetings that we haven't held because of COVID, and et cetera. So, I guess we haven't had any real long meetings at the same time too. So I think that's all good news. Anything else on that?
Chair, Commissioners, there's no action required on this item. This is just a review. And Chair Iverson, I assume you're intending to, are planning to attend the meeting on January 24th? Okay.
And that's to say that'll be a PowerPoint?
Correct. Yep.
And you will get credit for 99% of it?
Give that credit to Isaac.
You and Isaac.
You just correct track.
The other final discussion item that we have on our agenda tonight is to adopt our 2022 Planning Commission meeting calendar and work plan. And I will turn it back over to Marty to do a presentation on that.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. This item, we do have two action items. We do need to formally adopt our calendar and work plan. So with that, I will start with the short side. The proposed meeting calendar was included in your background packet, just like previous years. We intend to meet the first and third Tuesday of each month with a start time of 6 p.m. We do have a meeting tentatively scheduled for Wednesday, August 3rd, instead of our normal Tuesday, August 2nd. Due to night to night. So we've officially put that on the calendar. Of course, meetings can be changed or canceled with advance notice as things come up. So barring any questions related to the calendar itself, I'd turn it back to the chair to consider a motion to adopt it.
Yeah, one item on there is that February 1st is precinct caucus night. The first Tuesday in February. And is that an event that anyone else attends? Whichever party it may be. It's one that I don't mind saying I would encourage because there's an awful lot of stuff going on, and it's pretty much the process at its most basic point. So if we want to reschedule the February 1st, it's a meeting that I am somewhat obligated to attend at the same time, but that doesn't mean that we change it just for me at the same time. So.
Yeah, Chair, members of the Commission, I think what I would recommend is, at least for the purposes of adopting the calendar, we keep the February 1st date, and maybe I'll send a email out to the group tomorrow and just see if there's anyone else that anticipates having any conflicts that date. I believe we do have a sketch plat review tentatively scheduled for that evening, so if we're able to keep the meeting date and have a quorum, I think that would be ideal, but my recommendation would be keep it for purposes of the calendar, and I can send out a note tomorrow and see if there's any conflicts.
One time you're going to be in South America, right?
Well, that's where I'm supposed to be right now.
Okay.
So, but
I have a question or suggestion, and it's not necessarily pertaining to our schedule, but I know that whenever we are considering and interviewing prospective new planning commissioners, it's always during spring break. And that's a problem for families. So if it's a young person that has children in school and they aren't going to be in town, that's problematic. I'm just wondering if that's something we can look at closer.
Commissioner Moore, members of the Commission, coincidentally, we have moved up the Planning Commission interviews to the February 28th meeting. it had been determined internally that it gets to be too much with all three commissions interviewing at the same work session and things get rushed toward the end. So Planning Commission, the deadline for applications and the interview date have been moved up 2 weeks from what they typically are. And Planning Commission will be held independently of the other two commissions, which will be held, their interviews will be held at their normal time. So it will actually be in late February this year.
Good deal. Is there a motion to adopt the 2022 Planning Commission meeting calendar as presented?
I'll move that we adopt the 2022 Planning Commission meeting calendar.
Superb. Is there a second?
Second that motion.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion does carry. The other, that's it, isn't it?
Work plan.
Work plan, yep. Excuse me, that, because one is before the other. Yeah, so the other is our work plan that, I'll turn it back over to Marty to present that.
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. So again, the work plan was included in your background packet, but we'll go over some of those items now and then can have a discussion if there are items that should be considered to be added or edited or any feedback from the commission. So again, one of the just ongoing duties of this group is to hear and provide recommendations to the city council on sketch plats, preliminary plats, variances, conditional use permits, and other land use applications within statutory time requirements. So staff feels that's an important one to keep at the top of our work plan. Again, just related to some of the other discussion we've been having in 2021 to continue reviewing our residential districts and plan unit development zoning code items and make those recommendations for any changes or edits to the city council at some point in 2022. One item that had been directed by the city council during their strategic planning session last year was to review the sign regulations within the Victoria zoning code. So that's something that we've added to the 2022 work plan to do some code review and determine if there should be any amendments made to that ordinance. There is also a potential that with the potential increase in rental apartment complexes with some of the proposed developments and things going on downtown west and some other things that have been kicked around, at least in the preliminary stages with staff, that there may be an increase in apartment complexes coming down the pipeline, or at least apartment complex proposals. So staff anticipates a discussion being needed on a potential implementation of a rental licensing program. So we'd envision that this body would have a part to play in those discussions. So we've included that as part of the work plan as well. Some carryover from last year, things we didn't get to review and providing recommendations on any of the development and standards within those developments for the 13.5 acres downtown west as those begin to hopefully come forward. And then reviewing the potential ordinance additions, amendments for placemaking standards for the CBD in downtown west as well. And then another carryover, conducting follow-up and providing recommendations to the city council on the small area plan area, including development of new commercial zoning districts as development moves closer to this area. And then reviewing and providing recommendations to city council on any other zoning code sections that may come up. Predatory offender ordinance is a good example of something like that was not on anyone's work plan last year, but something that came to the forefront. And then again, providing our mid-year and end-of-year reports on progress to the city council. So with that, Chair, I will turn it back over to you to facilitate any questions or discussions you might have.
Sure, excellent. Is there any discussion on that, on the work plan?
I actually have one discussion item for that. Back on November 8th, according to our things that we accomplished, there was the workshop that took place with the Urban Land Institute, and I thought it was an excellent presentation. I thought that everybody who attended took something away and got some value out of it. And I would like to see our planning commission maybe have our own workshop to follow up on that and digest what was presented and maybe use that to perhaps set some sort of working principles or some, guidelines that the planning commission could use towards future viewpoints on some of the affordable housing topics that were presented, and be part of our work plan to make recommendations to city for, perhaps policy.
Commissioner Vansky, Chair, members of the commission, I think that's a great addition if the commission agrees.
Would it be prudent to also include city council for that work session, or is that just ours?
Again, I think my recommendation would be, and the commission can discuss if they agree or disagree with that, but I think the starting some of that conversation at this level and developing some thoughts, ideas, recommendations that would then go to the city council, probably at multiple points throughout part of that process, just say, here's some things we're thinking about. Are you aligned with this? Should we go back and rethink some of those things? I don't know that it would necessarily, because I'd envision it likely being multiple meetings to discuss some of these topics and principles, and not needing the city council at each one of those, but updating the city council as we progress. Is that, Commissioner Vansky, is that somewhat in line with what you're?
Yeah, I'd say that that's very fair, to crystallize as a group some of our thoughts, and then as, when the time is right, then bring the city council back in, in for, a discussion. It's everybody all on the right page, and then, look to move forward.
Should that be a higher priority than zoning, or do you need to do both?
The short answer is we'd like to try to do both. Obviously we didn't get to all of our work plan items in 2021. I would not be shocked or surprised if we don't get to all of our work plan items in 2022 either. I tend to put more on our plate than we can probably get done in 1 year, with the idea that if things get tabled or changed or priorities change, we can shift. But I certainly think that's something that we can work to incorporate, at least having some discussions throughout the year.
Has the city council had any follow-up discussions post the ULI conversation that we should take into consideration as we move forward?
Yeah, Commissioner Murray, Chair, members of the commission, nothing formal yet at this point in time.
There's one other item that might be beneficial to add, and that's transportation, and just how that impacts future development, because we may have an idea of how a project needs to be developed, but at the end of the day, access and future road plans are going to happen before any development happens. So if there's a way that we can spend some time discussing that at some point, that might be beneficial. Like Victoria Drive, Engler 5, all that.
Yeah, Commissioner Moore, Chair, members of the commission, I think there would potentially be an opportunity to have City Engineer Guerin attend a meeting and just provide a transportation overview. Maybe even gets to, at least the base level of some of that, and we can all get the same understanding as to what's being planned in some of these studies and things going forward and how that impacts things. Kara, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I volunteered you for a meeting.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with you, Greg, that we want to put that on the agenda. Is everyone in agreement on that? The urban study. I had printed off the entire packet and have actually read through it a few times, and there's an awful lot of knowledge in that.
Seems a shame to have that meeting and have really no follow-up to it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
What a waste.
You're right.
It's a good investment.
The sad part was it went long.
Well,
The Carver County people, it would have been nice to hear more from them, because they're in such close proximity on some of the things they've done.
and I think we learned that the only way that happens is through planning, because they're complicated projects, right? And so if we plan for it, let's hope that it has a higher level of success.
Chair, members of the commission, just Commissioner Sporting, to your point about the CDA, we do hope to bring the CDA in for a more in-depth workshop at some point in 2022 as well. That I'd imagine would likely be an invited joint workshop, but it's noted as part of the City Council's workshop plan that we'd like to get the CDA in just to provide them more time specifically for their initiatives. So.
Any other thoughts on that? Yeah, thank you for that, Greg. That's excellent. Appreciate it.
And then the transportation overview, I thought that's a good one too.
So is there a motion to adopt the 2022 Planning Commission work plan with the 2 additions?
I'll make a motion to adopt the 2022 work plan with the 2 additions.
Superb. Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Excellent. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to miscellaneous section of our agenda. The only miscellaneous thing I have is city council meeting. Was anyone in attendance to do a report on a city council meeting?
I reviewed the city council meeting on, and I don't know, I think they set a record on how fast it got done. I think it was less than 5-minute meeting. I'm glad I didn't drive in here for it.
I was there.
And it was all on consent agenda, wasn't a lot to discuss, and it got approved, and they moved on to their workshop. So
Yeah.
it was rather quick. But
Yep. All the business got completed.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yep. Not an awful lot to add beyond that.
no.
So excellent. Any other thoughts? Marty?
Couple of miscellaneous items from staff. So just to formally introduce our new planning and code enforcement technician, Keith Demarest. Today is his first day with the city. So as you'll recall, Isaac was earlier this fall promoted to planner, and so Keith will be taking over a lot of our code enforcement and some of the planning technician related duties. So you'll likely be seeing him at planning commissions going forward, and hopefully we didn't scare him off today. So we're glad to have him.
Try harder.
No, thanks for having me aboard. This is great. This is eye-opening. It's humbling. I look forward to working with you all in the future.
Well, you're working with a great group,
Yeah,
a great team.
that's my first impression too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And then just my second miscellaneous item is just a reminder that applications are open currently for planning commission. So I know there are a few folks on this board that have expiring terms that I'd encourage to reapply again if you're able to make it work, or otherwise if you know anybody in your personal lives or neighbors or things that you think might be interested. Please spread the word so we can make sure we have a full commission and get some alternates back at the table.
I was informed that I was the first one to submit an application, so.
And Isaac actually has a miscellaneous item.
So we don't forget this time, Chair, members of the commission, you do have some art ballots in front of you. So after the meeting, if you could take a look around and vote for your favorite piece of art, that would be appreciated.
Just one, right?
Just one. No double voting.
How are applications coming for the planning commission? I mean, are there 10 applicants, 2 applicants?
There's one.
Yeah, Commissioner Pedersen, chair, members of the commission, the application period's only been open for a little over a week now, I believe. But we do currently only have one application, which, as Mr. Iverson has indicated, is his. So we've got several weeks yet of the application period being open, but and we'll be doing more promotion. So
Do the alternates automatically get the opportunity to
Yeah, so currently, as you probably discovered, we're kind of sans alternates at the moment. We've had a couple folks just not be able to make the meeting dates, and because we're so close to the recruitment period, we didn't process a formal resignation for the alternates. We're just going to wait until we get to applications. But in a typical process, an alternate would need to apply for an open position annually as they become available.
So how many do we have that are coming up?
There are 3 expiring terms on the regular commission, and then we'd like to get 2 alternates at the table as well. That's why I'm encouraging our applicants who are at expiring terms to reapply if they are so able to do so.
Well, I was informed by a past city council member when I was originally interviewed, and he said, you know, the first 3 years, you don't really know an awful lot, but he said you really get productive in the second term. So I'm looking to get productive. And, you know, and I think it's...
Your apprenticeship is over.
That's exactly, yeah. Yeah, so I think there's a fair amount of that. You know, it was part of a discussion, you know, earlier this evening, casual discussion that there's an awful lot of educated and experienced people that have gained an awful lot of knowledge in, you know, a job like this at the same time, and that's a resource. You know, I mean, I would just view that as a absolute resource for the city that we don't want to lose at the same time. So, any other thought? Is it appropriate, Keith, for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've done and?
Absolutely. So I'm originally from New Jersey. Don't hold it against me. You'll never hear me cheering for my sports teams because they're all horrible for the last 20 years. Spent about 14 years in law enforcement. I medically retired out of that about 4 years ago. Been working with the St. Anthony School District for the past few years as a paraprofessional, reading aide, health aide. So these last couple of years, it's been all COVID. You know, that's pretty much been my bread and butter for the last couple of years. Wanted to get back into city employment, jumped on this, and, you know, just had a, you know, good feeling about it, you know, once I came here to meet everyone. So, yeah, I think it's been a great fit.
Very good, good. Welcome aboard again, you know, glad to have you.
Thank you.
Very good. Anything else from anyone? So I am looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We are officially adjourned.
Isaac, which one did you paint?
Thank you, everybody.